Emma Thompson sat quietly on the worn leather armchair in her cozy living room, gazing out the window at the soft autumn rain tapping against the glass. The house was peaceful, the kind of tranquility that only comes when the children have grown up and moved out, leaving behind echoes of laughter in the hallways that no longer filled the rooms. At 68, Emma had officially retired from her teaching career at the local high school, a profession she had dedicated nearly 4 decades of her life to. The students had come and gone, and so had the years, each one blending into the next as she poured her heart and soul into a job that, though rewarding, had consumed nearly every waking moment of her adult life. Her husband, John, had passed away 2 years ago, and since then, the house had become quieter than she ever expected it to be. The weight of her own thoughts began to settle in. Emma had always been a hard worker, someone who loved nurturing young minds and inspiring her students to dream big. But now, with no job to wake up for, no lessons to plan, and no students to guide, Emma found herself asking questions she hadn't thought to ask before. What now? What she missed? She had always prided herself on being practical, on doing what was needed rather than indulging in dreams or distractions. She had married young, raised 2 children, and focused on her career, putting aside personal desires for the sake of her family and obligations. She had never been one to complain about the choices she made, but now, looking back, she wondered if some of the dreams she once had been put away for too long, locked in a box she only now seemed to remember. Sifting through an old box of photos, Emma's fingers brushed against the edges of yellowed pictures from her younger years. A photograph from a trip to Europe caught her eye, a picture of her, fresh-faced and full of excitement, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower with her college roommate, Lisa. That trip, a dream she'd had for years, had been one of the few adventures of her youth. After that, life had taken over. She had started her teaching career, met John, got married, had children, and watched her dreams of travel and adventure slowly fade into the background. Emma paused, her finger tracing the image of her younger self. Had she missed out on so much? She had spent so much time being responsible and doing what was expected of her that she had neglected the passions that once filled her with excitement. She remembered wanting to learn how to paint, but never having the time. She remembered dreaming of exploring the world, but always thinking there would be time for that later. She remembered thinking that once the kids were older, once she retired, but those once moments had never come when she imagined they would. As she sat in her chair, the rain continuing to fall outside, Emma felt a wave of regret wash over her. The years had passed, and now she was faced with the undeniable truth that many of the things she had always dreamed of doing remained undone. She had wanted to travel the world, but now, at 68, could she still take that first step toward adventure? Could she still take up painting, even though she was no longer the young woman who had once dreamed of becoming an artist? Could she still start over, pursue the passions that had been shelved for so long, and live the life she had always imagined for herself? Emma wasn't sure where to begin. She wasn't used to thinking in terms of herself or her own desires. For decades, everything had been about others, her students, her children, her husband. But now, sitting alone in her living room, Emma realized that she had neglected the most important person of all, herself. And she knew that the longer she waited to act, the more she would regret not having done anything sooner. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone vibrating on the coffee table. She glanced at the screen. It was a message from her old friend, Nancy, who had moved to Florida years ago after retiring from her own career. Emma had always admired Nancy's ability to embrace life, even in her later years. While Emma had stayed close to home, caring for her family and focusing on her career, Nancy had traveled, taken up new hobbies, and even started a small online business selling handmade jewelry. She had never allowed age or life's challenges to hold her back. "Hey, Emma, just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I was thinking about you the other day. I know it's been a while, but I'd love to catch up soon. We should talk about all the amazing things we can do at our age. Don't wait too long to start living your life again. Talk soon." Emma smiled at the message. Nancy was always so full of energy, so optimistic about the future. She was the type of person who saw every age as an opportunity to do something new, something exciting. Emma's thoughts wandered back to the regrets she had been feeling earlier. Maybe Nancy was right. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe there was still time to take a leap, to do the thing she had once dreamed of but never had the courage to pursue. With a deep breath, Emma typed a quick reply. I'd love to catch up. Let's talk soon. Maybe you can give me some advice on how to start living again. She hit send and set the phone back on the table. A part of her felt hesitant. Was it really possible to change at her age? Could she really start living the life she had always imagined? Now that time seemed to be running out. She didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. Emma was ready to stop living with regrets. She was ready to take control of her life once more, to seek out the things that had been left behind. For the first time in a long while, Emma felt a spark of hope. There was still time, she told herself. There was always time, as long as she was willing to make the effort. She would start small. She would pick one thing to focus on, one passion to reignite. Whether it was traveling, painting, or something else entirely, she would start with the first step. As the rain finally slowed to a gentle drizzle, Emma stood up from her chair and walked to the bookshelf across the room. She ran her hand over the spines of the books that lined the shelves. So many stories, so many lives lived through the pages. She smiled to herself. She realized that her own story wasn't over yet. There were still chapters to write, adventures to experience, and dreams to chase. It was time to stop waiting for the perfect moment and start creating the moment herself. Emma knew that life wasn't just about the milestones. It was about the journey, and she was ready to begin hers, no matter how late it seemed. Because, in the end, it wasn't about when you started, but how you lived each day after that. And with that thought, Emma felt a sense of peace settle within her. The past had been full of lessons, and she was finally ready to learn the most important one. It was never too late to start living the life you've always wanted. The first step had been taken. The journey had begun. For the first few days after sending her message to Nancy, Emma found herself distracted. Every time she walked through the house, she passed by the shelves of books, the piles of journals, the old suitcases she had never used. She thought about how, for so many years, her life had been about meeting expectations, her children's needs, her students' desires, her husband's ambitions. She had spent decades putting others first, and now, at 68, it felt strange to even begin thinking about what she wanted. She had never allowed herself the luxury of self-indulgence, of pursuing dreams for the sake of her own happiness. The thoughts swirled in her mind. It's too late to start over. What if I fail? What if it's too much? But there was a quiet, persistent voice inside her that refused to let go of the idea of reinvention. This wasn't just about checking items off a bucket list, she realized. It was about reawakening parts of herself she had long neglected. This was about finding joy, purpose, and excitement in the years that were left. And that was something she could control. Nancy called her the next day. Emma. Nancy's voice was as lively and full of energy as Emma remembered it. How are you, my dear? I'm so glad you replied. We really need to talk about how you're going to start embracing this new chapter in your life. It's time you take the plunge, darling. Trust me, the world is so much more vibrant when you step out of your comfort zone. Emma chuckled softly. I'm just not sure where to begin, Nancy. It all feels a bit overwhelming. I've spent my whole life living a certain way, working hard, raising kids, always putting everything else first. Now that I have time, I feel almost lost. That's completely normal, Emma. The first step is always the hardest, but you've already made it. You're thinking about what you want. And that's huge. The trick is to start small. You don't need to revolutionize your life overnight. We can take it one step at a time, piece by piece. Her friend's words resonated with Emma, but still, the doubts crept in. What if I'm not capable? What if my health can't keep up with my dreams? I've never traveled much, and now I'm worried about all the logistics. What if I fail at something as simple as painting? I don't even know where to begin with that, either. Nancy paused for a moment before responding. Do you know what my favorite thing about getting older is, Emma? The fact that I don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. It's liberating. I'm not trying to impress people or keep up with expectations. I'm doing what I want, and that's all that matters. You need to give yourself permission to be imperfect, to take risks, to start small. It's never too late to find your joy. The phone call ended, and Emma sat back in her chair, the weight of Nancy's words lingering. There was a freedom in the idea of embracing imperfection, of not needing to measure up to some imaginary standard. Could she really do it? Could she start pursuing the things she loved without worrying about failing, without fearing judgment? Emma spent the next few days reflecting on the advice Nancy had given her. She had been so used to being responsible, to being the one who took care of everyone else. It felt foreign, almost uncomfortable, to think about herself for a change. But she also realized that this was the key to everything. She needed to take the first step. No one else could do it for her. The first challenge was something small, but symbolic: signing up for a painting class. It was something she had always wanted to try, something that had lingered in her mind for years. She could still remember the joy she had felt during the brief art lessons she'd taken in college, the satisfaction of mixing colors and seeing them come to life on a canvas. But after graduation, life had gotten busy, and that passion had fallen by the wayside. Now, as she thought about it, she realized it was a perfect place to start. It didn't matter if she wasn't any good. What mattered was that she was taking the time to nurture a part of herself that had been neglected. She found a local studio that offered adult painting classes for beginners. With a mix of excitement and anxiety, Emma signed up. The fear of failing began to stir again. What if she was the worst in the class? What if the instructor thought she was wasting their time? But she forced herself to silence those thoughts. This was for her, she reminded herself, not for anyone else. She didn't need to be the best. She just needed to enjoy the process. The first class was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. The studio was filled with people of all ages, and the instructor, a woman in her mid-40s named Linda, made everyone feel welcome. As Emma settled into her seat, she could feel her nerves creeping up again. But then, as the instructor began explaining the techniques and guiding everyone through the first exercise, Emma felt a sense of calm. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about embracing the experience, experimenting with colors, and letting go of her fears. By the end of the first session, Emma had completed her first painting, a simple abstract piece that looked nothing like what she had imagined when she walked into the class. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had completed it, that she had taken that first step into something new, something just for her. She felt a rush of accomplishment, and for the first time in a long while, she felt alive in a way she hadn't experienced in years. The following weeks were filled with more classes, more paintings, and more lessons in letting go of her perfectionism. As she painted, Emma began to realize something important. The fear of failure wasn't as powerful as she had imagined. In fact, it was the very thing holding her back from fully enjoying life. The more she embraced her imperfections, the more she discovered a sense of freedom. There was no expectation, no pressure. She was simply enjoying the process. But painting wasn't the only thing Emma began to explore. She also started researching travel opportunities. At first, she considered traveling alone, but the idea of navigating unfamiliar places by herself seemed daunting. She wasn't sure if she was physically capable of managing the logistics of international travel, especially with her health concerns. But she soon realized that traveling didn't have to be an all-or-nothing experience. She could start small, with short trips to places she had always wanted to visit, places close enough to home to make her feel comfortable, but far enough to give her that sense of adventure. With a sense of determination, Emma began planning a weekend trip to the nearby coast. She spent days researching affordable accommodations, exploring local attractions, and booking activities that were within her comfort zone. It wasn't Paris or Rome, but it was a start, a new experience, something to look forward to. And that, she realized, was the key, focusing on the present, on the possibilities that existed right in front of her, rather than worrying about what she hadn't done or what she might not be able to do. As the weeks went by, Emma found herself slowly shedding her old habits of self-doubt and fear. She didn't have to make grand gestures to feel fulfilled. Sometimes it was the smallest steps that made the biggest impact. She continued her painting classes, and her confidence grew with each new piece she completed. She explored new hobbies like gardening and photography, which gave her a deeper appreciation for the simple pleasures of life. And she started taking regular walks, something she had neglected for years, to maintain her health and clear her mind. The most significant shift, however, came in the way Emma viewed herself. She no longer saw herself as someone defined by the role she had played for others: teacher, wife, mother. She was Emma, a woman who still had dreams and desires, no matter how old she was. She didn't need to live up to anyone's expectations but her own. One afternoon, as Emma sat in her favorite chair with a cup of tea and a new book in her hand, she smiled to herself. The woman staring back at her from the mirror was someone she recognized, but she was different now. She had taken control of her own life. She had faced her fears, let go of her self-doubt, and found the courage to start something new. And that, she realized, was just the beginning. The road ahead wasn't always going to be easy, but it would be hers to navigate. And that was enough. The sound of Emma's phone ringing echoed through her small kitchen as she stood by the window, stirring a pot of vegetable soup. She looked down at the caller ID. It was Nancy. "Hey there," Emma answered, a smile on her face. She had come to cherish these conversations. Nancy, despite living miles away, had become a kind of life coach, a friend who continually encouraged her to embrace new experiences and overcome her doubts. Every time they spoke, Emma felt a little more confident in her choices and decisions. "Emma, how's everything going?" Nancy's voice crackled with enthusiasm. "Have you been painting? Taking those little adventures you promised me?" Emma let out a soft laugh. "I have, actually. The painting classes are going well, slowly but surely. I'm still a beginner, but I'm starting to enjoy the process more than I ever expected. And, yes, I plan a weekend getaway to the coast. I leave next week." "Well, look at you," Nancy exclaimed. "That's fantastic. I'm so proud of you. Now, let me ask you something. Have you thought about reconnecting with any old friends? I mean, you've been busy doing things for yourself, which is great, but it's time to start surrounding yourself with people who will help you grow even more." The suggestion caught Emma off guard. She'd been so focused on her personal growth, the idea of reconnecting with old friends hadn't crossed her mind. But as she thought about it, she realized that many of the friendships she'd once cherished had faded over the years, largely because she had been so wrapped up in her family and career. She hadn't given herself permission to nurture those connections. "I haven't thought about that," Emma admitted. "I've sort of kept to myself lately, which has been fine, but I suppose you're right. It wouldn't hurt to reconnect with some people." "Exactly," Nancy replied. "You'd be surprised what a boost it can give you to revisit old connections, even if it's just for coffee or a walk in the park. Plus, you never know what new adventures you might embark on together." Emma felt a spark of excitement at the thought. It had been years since she'd seen some of her closest childhood friends, and she had no real reason why they had lost touch. They had all scattered as life took them in different directions, but she could still remember the warmth and laughter of those days. Maybe it was time to rekindle those relationships. After all, one of the things she had come to realize during her own journey of rediscovery was how important it was to surround yourself with people who would lift you up, not hold you back. The next morning, after her painting class, Emma made a list of old friends she had lost contact with over the years. Her heart fluttered as she scribbled down names she hadn't thought about in decades, names that used to be synonymous with adventure, fun, and shared experiences. One name, in particular, stood out: Karen Walker. Karen had been Emma's best friend throughout elementary and high school. They had done everything together, played in the neighborhood park, swapped stories in their school hallways, and shared secrets late into the night. But after graduation, they had drifted apart. Emma had moved to a different town for college and then settled in the same area, while Karen had moved across the country to pursue a job opportunity. Their once inseparable bond had faded into infrequent letters and holiday greetings, eventually becoming non-existent as life took hold. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, Emma sent Karen a message on social media, tentatively reaching out after all these years. She kept it light, not wanting to seem too forward. Karan, it's Emma. I know it's been a while, but I've been thinking about you lately. I hope life's been good to you. If you ever want to reconnect, I'd love to catch up. The days that followed felt like an eternity. Emma checked her phone obsessively, waiting for a response. She told herself that it didn't matter whether Karen replied or not, that she had made the effort, and that was enough. But deep down, she couldn't help but hope for a sign that things could be different, that a part of her past was still waiting to be rekindled. And then, one evening, her phone buzzed with a new message. "Emma, is that really you? Wow, this is a blast from the past. I can't believe you reached out. Life's been a bit of a whirlwind on my end, but I'd love to reconnect. It's been way too long." A wave of relief washed over Emma. She hadn't realized how much she had missed her old friend until that very moment. They exchanged a few more messages, agreeing to meet up in person at a nearby cafe. The anticipation made Emma nervous in the best way. She hadn't seen Karen in over 40 years, but she felt like they could pick up right where they left off. The day of their meeting, Emma carefully selected her outfit, wanting to look just right. She hadn't been on a coffee date with a friend in so long, and there was something exciting about the idea of reconnecting with someone who had once been such a significant part of her life. When she arrived at the cafe, she spotted Karen immediately. Time had changed them both. Karen looked different, of course, with a few wrinkles and gray hairs, but her smile was as warm and inviting as it had been all those years ago. They embraced, and Emma felt a rush of nostalgia. They ordered coffee and sat down, chatting like no time had passed at all. Karen shared stories of her life, her career, and her adventures. She had moved around a lot, lived in various cities, and even worked abroad for a few years. Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at her friend's boldness. Karen had lived a life full of change and risk, always stepping outside of her comfort zone. As they continued to catch up, Emma shared her own journey, including the struggle she had faced after retiring and her desire to embrace life once more. Karen's eyes lit up with understanding. "I get it," Karen said. "You spent all these years being so responsible, taking care of everyone else. But now, you've earned this time to focus on yourself. And you don't have to do it alone, either. It's never too late to start living for you." The conversation flowed easily, and before they knew it, hours had passed. They agreed to stay in touch and make plans for another outing soon. Emma felt rejuvenated. Not only had she rekindled a friendship, but she had also been reminded of the importance of connection. She had spent so many years caught up in her own world that she had forgotten how much joy could come from sharing experiences with others. In the weeks that followed, Emma and Karen began meeting regularly. Sometimes it was for a walk in the park, other times for lunch or a visit to a museum. They found they still had much in common. Both had a love for art, nature, and quiet, reflective moments. But there was also a new dynamic in their friendship. Emma noticed how Karen's adventurous spirit had rubbed off on her, inspiring her to take risks and try new things. One day, Karen suggested they take a trip together. "How about a weekend getaway to the coast?" She asked. "We could explore, walk on the beach, and just enjoy the peace and quiet. No pressure, just the two of us like old times." Emma hesitated at first. Traveling with someone else, even a friend, still felt a little daunting. But Karen's infectious enthusiasm won her over. They booked the trip, and before long, they were packing their bags, excited for what lay ahead. The weekend was everything Emma had hoped for and more. They stayed in a charming bed and breakfast near the beach, spending their days exploring quaint coastal villages, eating fresh seafood, and watching the sunset over the ocean. Emma realized that the trip wasn't just about the destination. It was about reconnecting with herself and with someone who had once been a huge part of her life. She had been so focused on her own reinvention that she had forgotten how much power there was in shared experiences, in rediscovering the beauty of companionship. As the weekend came to an end, Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had reconnected with Karen, yes, but more importantly, she had reconnected with a part of herself that she had long forgotten. The simple joy of traveling, of seeing new places, and of spending time with a close friend had rekindled a spark inside her. She felt more alive, more engaged with the world than she had in years. It was a reminder that while it was important to pursue personal growth and self-discovery, it was equally important to nurture the relationships that had once meant the most to you. Those relationships, whether with old friends or new, were often the catalyst for deeper exploration and greater joy. Emma knew that her journey of reinvention wasn't just about what she could do on her own. It was also about the people she chose to share it with. As she drove home from the trip, her heart light, she couldn't help but smile. The adventure had only just begun. She was no longer just chasing after her own dreams. She was embracing the beauty of life's connections, one step at a time. As the weeks passed, Emma found herself becoming more and more comfortable in her new life. It had been months since she had signed up for that painting class, and what had once seemed like an intimidating leap into the unknown had become a cherished part of her routine. Each brushstroke, each color she mixed, had become an expression of herself, a freedom she hadn't known she was missing. Her apartment, once quiet and filled with old memories of family and routine, was now brimming with color and light. She had never thought of herself as an artist, but now, with every painting, Emma was beginning to see herself in a new light. It wasn't just about the art anymore. It was about discovering something about herself she'd forgotten existed. The process of painting had taught her to let go of control, to embrace the imperfect. Sometimes her work turned out beautifully, and other times it was nothing more than a canvas covered in mismatched colors. But that was the point. It was a reflection of her life. There were moments of brilliance, and there were moments of failure, but each part of the journey was valuable. Her painting classes had also given her a new sense of community. She had become friendly with some of her classmates, and one of them, Emily, a woman in her early 40s, had become a close friend. Emily was also a beginner, but she had a contagious enthusiasm and had pushed Emma to attend local art exhibitions and open studios. They had spent afternoons wandering galleries, discussing what they loved and didn't love about the work on display, and sharing their thoughts on the creative process. These conversations about art, life, and everything in between had deepened Emma's appreciation for the world around her. She had never really understood the world of modern art, but Emily's insight had opened her eyes to the beauty in abstraction, to the significance of expression over form. It was one such afternoon, after an exhibition of local artists, that Emma's life took an unexpected turn. She and Emily had been talking over lunch at a small cafe when Emma received a message from her son, David. He had been calling occasionally, checking in on her after his visits earlier in the year, but they hadn't spoken in a while. The message read, "Hey Mom, can we talk? I have something important to discuss." Emma's stomach dropped. David was always level-headed and calm, so when he said he had something important to discuss, her mind began to race. Was it something about his work, his health, or perhaps it had to do with his family? Emma didn't know why, but she felt a knot form in her chest. "Are you okay?" Emily asked, noticing the sudden shift in Emma's expression. "I'm not sure," Emma replied, staring at the screen of her phone. "It's David. He wants to talk. Do you want me to leave?" Emily asked, always sensitive to Emma's needs. "I can give you some space if you'd like." Emma hesitated for a moment, then shook her head. "No, it's okay. Let me just reply. I'll figure it out." She typed back, "Of course, David. When is a good time to chat?" The reply came quickly. "Can you talk tonight? I'll call around 7. "Okay," she typed before putting her phone down and leaning back in her chair. "I'm sure it's nothing serious," Emily reassured her. "You two have a great relationship. I'm sure it's just a catch-up or something." Emma smiled weakly. "I hope so. I don't know. Sometimes, when it's your kids, you always fear the worst, don't you?" Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I get it, but you've always been there for him, right? I'm sure everything's fine." That afternoon, as the sun began to set and she drove home from the cafe, Emma couldn't shake the sense of unease. David had always been the quiet one, the more reserved child. Her daughter, Megan, was outgoing and social, but David had always kept his feelings to himself. He had always been independent, even when he was younger. Emma had always admired that about him, but it also left her feeling like she didn't know everything that was going on in his life. When the clock finally struck 7, Emma found herself pacing around her living room, waiting for the call. She had started to prepare herself for whatever news David had to share, even though she had no idea what that could be. The phone rang, and she answered it quickly, trying to sound calm. "Hey, David," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. "Hi, Mom," David replied, his voice sounding soft but serious. "I've been thinking a lot lately, and I want to talk to you about something." Emma's heart started to race again. "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" "I've been offered a promotion at work," David began, and Emma's heart skipped a beat. A promotion? That sounded like good news. But the tone of his voice told her that this was more complicated than just a professional opportunity. "That's great, right?" Emma asked, relieved. "Congratulations, sweetheart." "Yeah, it's great," he replied, but there was a pause in his voice, a hesitation. "But here's the thing, Mom. The promotion would require me to move to another city. It's a big change. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I need your advice." Emma felt a wave of emotion hit her. She had always known that David had the potential to go far in his career, but the thought of him leaving was still difficult. He had grown up right under her roof, and while she had encouraged him to go out into the world and make something of himself, the idea of him being far away was still something she hadn't quite come to terms with. "Well," she said softly, "it sounds like a great opportunity for you, David. I'm sure you've thought it through. If it's something you want to do, I think you should go for it. I'll support you no matter what." There was another pause on the other end of the line before David spoke again, his voice more uncertain now. "I don't know, Mom. I don't know if I'm ready. This job, this move, it's everything I've been working for, but at the same time, it's so scary. I've been talking to Megan about it too, but I wanted to hear what you think." Emma sat down on the couch, taking a deep breath. She had always prided herself on being strong for her children, always ready to offer guidance when they needed it. But this time, the situation was different. David wasn't the boy who needed his mom to make decisions for him anymore. He was an adult, facing a choice that would shape his future. Emma realized that her role now wasn't to fix things for him, but to give him the space to figure it out for himself. "I think," Emma said carefully, "that you have to trust yourself, David. You're not a kid anymore. You've grown so much, and you're capable of making these decisions on your own. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. You'll always have my support, no matter what you choose." The world was full of possibilities, and Emma was ready to explore them. With each step she took, each decision she made, she was creating a new chapter in her own life. And, much like David, she was learning to embrace the unknown. The road ahead might not always be easy, but Emma knew one thing for certain. She was no longer afraid to live her life on her own terms. David was quiet for a moment, and then he spoke again, his voice full of emotion. "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot to me. I've been so afraid of making the wrong choice. But I think I'm ready to take this step. I'll miss you, though." Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. "I'll miss you too, sweetheart. But I know you'll do great things. And you're not that far away, you know. You'll always have a home here if you need it." The conversation ended on a positive note, with Emma feeling a bittersweet sense of pride. Her son was about to take a big leap into the unknown, and she was proud of him for it. At the same time, she couldn't help but feel the pang of separation, the realization that life was moving forward in ways she hadn't anticipated. Later that evening, Emma sat by the window, staring out at the stars. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Karen. "Hey, how's everything with David? I know you were waiting to talk to him." Emma smiled, typing back quickly. "He's moving to another city. It's a big change, but I'm so proud of him." Karen's reply came almost immediately. "You've raised an incredible son, Emma. He's ready for this next chapter, and you should be too." Emma put her phone down and sighed. She had spent so many years focusing on raising her children and ensuring their success that she had forgotten to prepare herself for the inevitable moment when they would grow up and move on with their own lives. But in that moment, she realized something important. Life was about change. It was about embracing the unknown and having the courage to face whatever came next. David's decision was a reminder that her own journey was far from over. She had only just begun to rediscover herself, to embrace her own passions, and to reconnect with the people who mattered most.